You're quite concerned with how you're going to come across.
Not really, no. I come from a world of image. That's the family business.
This moment tells us a lot about Kendall Roy. The appearance of success, the appearance of competence, is something he's been raised to prioritize. He's never known anything else. Of all the siblings, Kendall appears to be the most competent and ambitious. But then why is it that over the first 3 seasons of Succession, no matter how many risks he takes, that he inevitably breaks under the pressure and seems incapable of truly succeeding? Let's examine the character Kendall Roy, wonderfully played by Jeremy Strong, in closer detail. When we first meet Kendall, he's singing along to hip-hop, getting ready to make the deal of his life. He seems confident and ready to take on the world, even gaining reassurance from his driver.
You're the man, Mr. Roy. You're the man.
In the meeting with Lawrence, he tries to come across as business-savvy, personable, and cool, even referring to his potential business partner as dude. But all of this people-pleasing turns Lawrence off. He not only rejects Kendall's offer, but goes on to call him a daddy's boy, and notes that he has no real track record, except for the track marks on his arm, from shooting junk. Kendall doesn't stand up for himself, and once Lawrence leaves, tries to sweeten the deal even further, rewarding Lawrence with more money for disrespecting him. From start to finish, this opening sequence sets up everything we need to know about Kendall. Firstly, we're shown that there's a clear disconnect between how Kendall perceives himself and how the world views him.
You make it happen. Brownstones, water towers, trees, skyscrapers, prize fighters and Wall Street traders.
Which carries over to the meeting itself, where we learn that he wants to be liked, avoids conflict, has a history of addiction issues, uses money to solve problems, and can't escape his father's shadow. He enters the room on top of the world, and exits like a broken, insecure child. He takes business personally because his entire personality and identity is attached to the business empire of his father. This causes him to harbour a deep insecurity that he doesn't deserve the privileged life he leads, while also feeling conflicted because he didn't deserve the emotionally abusive childhood he had either. Which is why his goal is to prove that not only can he be a successor to Logan's empire, but unlike his father, can actually be a decent human being, or at the very least a likeable leader, too. In order to justify these ambitions as actual ambitions, not just entitlements, Kendall focuses on all the differences between himself and his father, selling the idea that he's a necessary upgrade, one that understands this new tech media landscape, the next generation, which he showcases by constantly trying to sound hip and trendy.
Come on, I came all the way up here, dude. I think Walter is the shiz.
Yo! These may seem like superficialities, but given the Roy family exist in a media empire, Kendall has learned from experience that image and perception is everything. And when he talks about the direction the world is moving, and how the company needs to adapt to survive, he's not just coherent, but actually seems right. But if he's so right, why does he fail? Kendall has many weaknesses.
You lack killer instinct, you're wet, you're green, you're intellectually insecure, you're not emotionally strong enough, you have addiction issues.
Wait, that's enough.
For me, I think it boils down to 3 key issues: a need for validation, fake relationships, and substance abuse problems. His need for validation stems from his childhood. He was trained to worship the ground his father walks on, while simultaneously witnessing how the world rewards him for his toxic behavior. But beyond that, Logan pitted the siblings against one another, failing to provide any real emotional sustenance to develop under. In Logan's world, nothing is ever good enough, and if you try to prove you are good enough to challenge him, his competitive side lashes out, and he bullies you back into compliance, making the children scared to ever try again, while also aware that he only respects people that pose a real threat to him, mixing together adversarial competitive dynamics and what should be an emotional bedrock of family support. This sense of never being quite good enough and not receiving any positive feedback makes Kendall seek validation with the world, as from Kendall's perspective, the world at large is the only place big enough to compete with his father. So if the media praise him and the markets financially reward him, then it will prove he is deserving of the love his father never gave him. We're also given the impression that Logan was physically abusive to his children, and that Kendall was the one to step up and fight against him. The two face off time and time again, but perhaps due to receiving a beating from his father, or just being fearful of him, Logan finds it easy to break Kendall, attacking any display of emotion or weakness.
Are you f***ing crying?
Oh, go on, cry me a river.
A reality is that, despite not wanting to be, Kendall is an emotional person, and this deep need for validation is only made more tragic by the superficial world he lives in. All of his relationships are tainted by his family's power and influence. Think about it. Who are Kendall's real friends? Stewie, who just uses him for business deals? Comfrey, his assistant that bitches about him behind his back? Does anyone really like or value him? Or are they just using him, either for a business play or to cozy up to money? This need for validation and his desire to prove himself makes him easily taken advantage of whenever he tries to depart from the safety of his family's empire. At his core, Kendall feels isolated and unheard, as his family don't validate his emotional pain and the outside world can't relate to him due to his wealth. So he uses music, in the form of rapping, to be seen, to express himself, and to connect with others. But at his 40th birthday party, these issues of seeking validation and only having fake relationships come to a head. It seems that no matter how much money he throws at the party or how many cool people attend, he can't escape the fact that he is, in many ways, completely alone. He becomes self-aware and embarrassed, choosing to not sing or perform or be seen by anyone, instead classifying the whole event as so pathetic. It's as if this one big superficial party has held a mirror up to his identity and how he's lived his life for 40 years. And that's because partying is connected to his final issue, addiction. Kendall uses drugs and alcohol to hide from his feelings, to, for a brief window of time, escape the realities of his life. The fact that he is technically incredibly privileged financially only creates more internal conflict, as it seems he's just incapable of ever finding true peace or happiness. Because his every need is catered for, his life lacks real adversity, risk, and consequences, and that's something that drugs provide. For example, in Season 1, he doesn't attend family therapy, but instead tries meth with some local users.
That's my brother.
Your brother sucks.
Yeah. No, he's actually, you know what? He's okay.
This scene tells us a lot. Drugs are the vessel Kendall uses to connect with others. It makes him both human, accepted, and on their level. The rationale being, if people feel good when they do drugs, then if they're doing drugs with me, they may associate me with that good feeling. So it becomes just another people-pleasing tactic to seek validation. This way he can be known as the cool, relatable Roy sibling. Until that same behaviour leads to a car accident, in which a young waiter drowns and Kendall flees the scene, only to be caught by his father and sucked back into his vortex, cradled like the child he is, releasing tears that are finally consoled and validated by his father. Now that we understand Kendall's flaws, let's take a quick look at how they manifest into action over the first 3 seasons, and despite showing promise, ultimately lead to failure. In Season 1, Logan informs Kendall he's not stepping down, and actually plans to stay in his position for another 5 or 10 years, crushing his hopes and dreams, while also giving him no validation for his hard work. Then, when Logan suffers from a stroke, Kendall sees this as his opportunity to strike. He believes he's a mogul in the making who knows best and has big plans, so temporarily takes charge, with Roman as his number 2. Then once Logan returns, Kendall continues his rebellious streak by trying to publicly announce that his father is retiring. When that fails, he stages a coup, trying to generate a vote of no confidence in his father. But in reality, the tables turn, and it proves to be a vote of no confidence in his leadership, as he can't rally enough votes. He's fired and now floats isolated in space, feeling that he needs to prove that he's more than just Logan's son because that's an insecurity he's always harbored. But as usual, he tries to have it both ways. He simultaneously wants to claim that he has the business acumen of his father, but is actually a good guy, as being morally righteous is what Kendall uses to justify his ambitions.
I'm a good guy who knows the bad guys, I've got reach, and I will fight for you every f***ing day.
He creates alliances with fake friends like Stewie to take down his dad, but in the process falls back into his addiction problems and kills a waiter, meaning he now has to betray his new alliances and become a slave to his father. So his potential was undermined by all of his key flaws, one by one. His dynamic with his father, his fake relationships, and his substance abuse problems. In Season 2, he becomes a shadow of his former self, doing anything Logan asks, including gutting Voltaire, Lawrence's company that once symbolized the biggest accomplishment of his career to date. It appears that he's earning back his father's trust, and starts to believe that maybe doing things his way will give him what he needs and wants long term.
He loves me. He does. I think it's just a wrong kind of love expression.
But when Logan tries to crush Kendall's dreams for good by making him the sacrificial lamb for the boat scandal, Kendall turns on him and engages in a media war. This should be the situation Kendall thrives in. He has the moral high ground, and if he is who he thinks he is, then he'll come across as more likable and finally win the approval of the world to crush his father. But instead, this only exacerbates Kendall's insecurities, and he starts to realize that the world doesn't like or support him as much as he thought they would. He concedes defeat and wants a payout to go away quietly, but can't even get that from Logan, instead receiving a harsh reminder that not only is he not a good person, but his flaws led to that young innocent waiter being killed. It seems that no matter what he tries, the same issues recycle in Kendall's life again and again. At his 40th birthday party, he called Greg a parasite for leeching off the family, because Kendall has wrapped his new identity around the idea that he doesn't need his family name in order to survive, that he's a good guy, that he's smart, that he's likable, that he's business savvy. But now, having not received the validation he needed from the world, failing to take over as King of Waystar, and somehow even losing the moral high ground in a war of words with Logan, his worst fears are coming to life. He really is just an entitled rich kid with fantasies of being a rapper, fantasies of being a shrewd businessman, fantasies of being admired. As Marcia pointed out to Shiv regarding Logan, he made you a playground, and you think it's the whole world.
What have you had your entire life that I didn't give you?
This realization causes him to spiral into a deep depression, and he becomes a shell of his former self. In Season 1, Kendall was visibly motivated and ambitious. In Season 2, his body language changed to much more withdrawn, dead behind the eyes, looking like a man whose potential and dreams were being crushed. But by the end of Season 3, his body language shifts to even more broken, not because his dreams are being thwarted, but because he's discovered that, in reality, they were never going to come true. They were merely mirages, delusions of grandeur. There's now nowhere to hide from his emotions, no party to blend into, no drugs to escape in, no payout to console him. As it stands at the end of Season 3, he'll never beat his father. The world will never view him as anything other than Logan's son, and anyone outside the family he partners with doesn't view him as a player. They view him as a pawn, someone superficial that can be easily manipulated and used.
Do you have any idea how it feels to be, promised something and then...
And that's the tragedy of Kendall Roy, the boy who can't be king. If you enjoy content like this and want to see more of it, please do consider supporting me on Patreon, as it really does make a difference to how much content I can pump out. Or if you can't afford that, then simply like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment down below to help the algorithm do its thing.